In this course, Slobodan will teach you how to incorporate 3D models into your React websites and product pages. Slobodan is a senior full-stack developer and popular course creator.
And welcome to this tutorial. In this one, you're gonna learn how to create this amazing React website with astonishing 3D animations. We're gonna learn how to use WebGi SDK to manipulate and find your 3D models. Then we're gonna learn how to display them in your website using WebGi and ThreeJS. And then we're gonna learn how to animate these 3D models using GSAP and WebGi. We're also gonna create this preview mode where your visitors can play around with their 3D model. And apart from that, we're gonna learn how to optimize these animations for mobile devices. And at the end, we're gonna build this project and deploy. So be ready to learn a ton of stuff. Some prerequisites for this tutorial is to have basic HTML, CSS and JavaScript knowledge. If this video reaches 1000 likes on my channel, I will be releasing the full source code on my GitHub. Otherwise, you may want to check patreon.com/codewithsloba for my support and full source code. So what are you waiting? Let's get yourself comfortable and let's start.
Code with Sloba.
And welcome back. So this is the website that we're going to be building in this tutorial. The first thing that we need to do is to head over to github.com. Here I have created this 3D website starter package for you guys. The URL of this repository is going to be in the description box below, but you can see the URL here as well. So what we need to do here is to download this package. This way, it's going to be very easy for us to set up the project and get going with the programming. So head over to this code button and click on it. There are multiple ways to download this repository, but the easiest way is to download as zip. So click here, download zip. Wait for a couple of seconds and the file has been downloaded. Now let's find it in the File Explorer. So click on the Explorer icon. And in my case, it's in the Downloads folder. Now let's right click on it and extract here. So we want to extract the content of this folder. Now open this folder in your code editor. For me, it's Visual Studio Code. So open the Visual Studio Code, File, Open Folder, Downloads, and iPhone 3D website starter-main. I will click Yes, I trust the authors. Let me zoom in this a little bit. And let's see what we have generated in this repository. First, you have this public folder on top. Here are all the files that you don't want to import using the module system in your application. So this could be the files that you import dynamically. The next folder is the source folder. Essentially, this is the core of our application. Inside of the source, we have this assets folder as well. In this folder, you can store images, SVGs, fonts, whatever you need. All the images that we are going to be using for this website are already downloaded and set here, so you don't have to bother with downloading separately. Next, we have this app.jsx component, which is the only component at the moment that we have in our application. But generally, this is going to be the root of our application, and everything that we put inside of this component will be displayed. Next to our component, we have this index.css file. Here, I already imported all the fonts that we need and generated all the code that we need for our application. As the purpose of this tutorial is not to learn CSS, but to learn how to animate 3D models. You can think of this file as a UI library. So all the classes already have been written for you, and all you have to do is add the proper classes to the sections in your HTML file. The next component is main.jsx file. This is the main file where we are importing our app component, our styles, and we are rendering our app component inside of the root div. And this div is located inside of the index.html file here. So entire application is going to be generated here. And we generate that using this createRoot method from React DOM. Apart from that, we have this package.json file as well. In case you are watching this tutorial years ahead and this repository doesn't exist, here are all the dependencies that you need to install in order to make this project running. Let me just close this folder so that you can see entire URLs, like so, and the dev dependencies as well. Now let's close this package.json file, and the last file that we have here is vite.config.js file. Vite is a front-end building tool, and I use it over Create React App because of its performance benefits. All this file does is set up some configuration files for React, but you don't have to worry about anything because it's going to do the configuration for you, and it has better performance than the Webpack. So let's close this file, and now let's install our packages. To open the terminal, I will just drag from the bottom in the VS Code, like so, and I will choose here git bash. Let me close the PowerShell. Now run the npm install command and hit enter. After a couple of seconds, you can see that we added this number of packages. And here on the top, we have this node_modules new folder generated for us, which contains all the folder packages that we need for our project. So let's close it. Now let's start our application by running the command npm run dev. Let's wait for a couple of seconds. This should start a development server for us. And just open the URL from the console. And as you can see, our application is successfully running. Let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. And the other thing that you can notice is that some default styles have already been applied to this application, like background color and foreground color. So this is a good start already. The first thing that I want to build is the navigation on top. So we want to replicate the Apple style here. So let's build this component first. Let me close this file and let's get back over to our Visual Studio Code. Reduce the size of the terminal, we don't need it. And now let's create a new folder here inside of the source folder. Name this file as components, or actually folder. Essentially, all the components that we create for our application are going to be stored here. As we don't have multiple pages in our application, we only have the components for this app.js file. So let's add a new file and name this file as nav.jsx. And this is short for navigation component. Let's import React from the top, and I'm using code snippet extension for faster development. If you want to have exactly the same shortcuts as I'm building in this tutorial, go to the extensions here and just install this simple React snippets code extension. Now let's close it and let's generate new functional component. So we can run the shortcut FFC for functional syntax component. And now enter the name of the component. For us, it's nav. Without the E on the end, so remove the E. And we got generated this code snippet. So what this code snippet does, it generated this functional component with empty return statement and also export default on the bottom. So let's start writing some JSX code. First, let's add a nav. Here. This nav will have a class name of nav-wrapper. Next, let's add an additional div inside of this nav. And this div will have a class name, and the class name is nav-content. Inside of this div, we're going to place our unordered list component with all the links for the navigation. And we created this nav element for the semantic purposes, and this div is just for styling purposes, as we need to apply some background color to our navigation and also to center it and apply some styles to our fonts as well. So let's create an unordered list here. And this list will also have a class name. And the name of the class name is list-styled. The first element of this list is going to be Apple logo. So let's just review it for a second. Open the browser. And if I open the final version, you can see on navigation here on top, on the left, we have first logo. And then we have all these links. And on the right side, we have here search icon and this like store purchase icon as well. So let's build that. Let's get back to our nav.jsx file. And let's import the logo first on top. So type the following: import logo from assets folder, images, logo.svg. Now let's add the list item here. We don't need any classes for the list item. And inside of the list item, let's add the image. So this image will hold the logo. Let's add the source property and pass in the logo. Next, we want to add the alt attribute as well. And let's write Apple. Now let's run the default formatting. So right click and format the document. Nice. And let's save and preview. But before we do that, actually, we need to include it inside of our app.jsx file. So here in the import section, write the following: import nav from components /nav. And let's remove this hello text and place the nav self-closing component. Now let's save it and open the browser. Close this file, and there you go. You can see that we have this white background and our logo here on the left. Let me just zoom out a little bit because this is too much, like so. Now let's add the links. Open the nav.jsx again and close this app.jsx file. Now let's add additional list element or item, and inside of this one we want to add anchor tag. Let's add a class name to this link. The class name is going to be link-styled. And we are not going to be adding the link attribute, but on the real website, obviously, you want to add that as well. For the first link, the name is going to be store of this link. So let's format this document. Let's save and let's preview. At the moment, the link is on the top right corner. But when we add all the other links, it's going to fall in place here next to the logo. So let's add them. So let's copy paste this link a couple of times, because we're just going to be changing the name of the links. The first one is store. The second one is Mac. The next one should be iPad. Then we have the iPhone. Next to iPhone, we have watch. Now let's paste a couple more. Next to the watch, we have AirPods. Then we have TV and home. Next, we have entertainment. Next to that, we have accessories. And after that, let's paste another one. And here, let's place support. Okay, and now we just need two more links. The first one is going to be for the search icon. So let's add an image element. Let's add a source attribute. And let's add an alt. For alt, let's write search. And let's import the search icon on the top here. Write the following: import search from assets, images, search.svg, like so. And let's import in the image here. And let's do the same for the second link, except that we're going to use the different image. Let's rename this one as store. And let's rename the alt attribute as well. And now let's import the store SVG as well. Copy the search import and just rename from search to store. Let's save this one. Again, let's format this document and let's preview. We got this failed import error, so we are missing one letter here, images, and here as well, images. So let's save and let's preview again. And now it works. With this, we have completed our navigation. And let's proceed on building this jumbotron. So let's close this page and let me open Visual Studio Code. And now let's add a new file in the components folder. Name this file as jumbotron.jsx. Once again, let's import the React on top and let's generate the functional component using the code snippets. Name of this component is going to be jumbotron. And let's just add some placeholder text. Now let's import this component inside of the app component. So on the top, import jumbotron from components/jumbotron. And let's place it here next to the nav. Make it a self-closing tag. Now let's save this in preview for a second. It's loaded correctly, so we can continue. Let's close the app.jsx file and let's close the navigation as well. Now let's add some JSX code. Here I want to add a root div. This div will have a class name, and the name of this class name is going to be jumbotron-section. And the second one is going to be wrapper. The first thing that I want to create inside is the title. So add h2 tag and let's add a class name of title. The text is going to be new. Below that, we want to add another image. Here we're going to display iPhone 14 Pro, but actually we're going to use an image for it, not the text. And although this sounds like a weird solution, but they probably wanted to keep the original look of the text on the logo, which cannot be 100% replicated with CSS, or at least they wanted to be sure it's rendered correctly on all devices. So let's add an image element and add a class name of logo. Source, we're going to add just in a second, and let's add an alt attribute. Right here, iPhone 14 Pro, like so. And let's import this image. So here in the import section, let's import iPhone from assets/images/iPhone-14.jpg. And let's place this one in the source attribute here. And let's preview that one. And there you go. Let's proceed. Let's add a text below this image. So add a paragraph, and this paragraph also has a class name. The class name is text. And the text is big and bigger, which means that they have versions that are big and bigger. Below that, let's add a span, which will hold the description. Let's add a class name as well, and the name of the class is description. And the text is going to be just some paying options from $41.62 per month for 24 months, or $99 before trade-in. We want to replicate exactly the same text as they have on their website. Let's see what we have for now. And this big title looks beautiful with the gradient, and Apple is well known for the simplicity and aesthetics. Next, below this, we need to add a buy button and learn more. So let's do that. So here, below this description, let's add unordered list. And this unordered list has a class name. Name of the class name is going to be links. Let's add a first list item. And this one is going to have a button inside of it. And here we're going to say buy. Also, let's add a class name to this button, and it's going to be simple button. Also, we can add an href, but actually we don't need it. Now let's copy paste this list item, and for the second one we want to add an anchor tag. This link is going to say learn more. And let's add a class name, link, and let's save it now. Let's preview. Boom, this looks beautiful. Let's continue. And the last part is that we want to add an image on the bottom, and we're gonna have a hand holding an iPhone. So let's import an image for that. Write the following: import and name this image as holding iPhone from --/assets. We want to get into the images, and the name of this image is iPhone-hand.png. And now let's add an image on the bottom here. After the unordered list, let's add an image, and let's add a class name. The class name is going to be iPhone-image. Source is going to be holding iPhone, and let's add an alt, which is going to be iPhone. Let's see how it looks. And boom, this looks great. Later in this tutorial, we're gonna add 3D model object here next to this phone, so it's not gonna look so empty. And also, when we add additional sections, we want programmatically to scroll down to these sections, clicking on Learn More here. So we're gonna add that later. Now let's add those additional sections. So let's get back here. And in the components folder, let's add additional file and name this file as soundsection.jsx. Let me show you what we are going to be building in this section. And when we open the final version, we can see that on this second section, we have more information about the sound and the new sound system. That's why I call it sound section. So let's build that. Again, let's import React from the top, and let's create functional component, all using the code snippets. The name of this component is going to be sound section. Let's add a placeholder text here in the return statement, and let's import this component in the app file. So let's open the app.jsx and import on the top sound section, and let's place it below the jumbotron. Make this one as self-closing tag as well. Let's save the app and let's close both of these. Let's just preview it so that we are sure that it's connected properly. And there you go, hello. Now let's add some JSX code. So let's remove this placeholder text. Let's add a div, and this div will have a class name. The name of the class name is sound-section, and let's add a wrapper class as well. Inside of wrapper, let's add one more div, and this div will be a div with a class name of body. And let's add additional div, and this one will have a class name of sound section content, and let's add additional class, just content. You may be wondering why we have so many divs, but the purpose of them is to have the proper structure and to have proper styles applied to them. The first thing inside of the content is going to be the title. So add an h2 element, and this one is going to have a class name, simply title. And here we're going to say new sound system, like so. And below that, let's add a paragraph. This paragraph has a class name of text, and the text is going to be fill the base, like so. Below that, we want to add a span with payment options, and let's add a class name of description. For the text, I can copy from the final version, so I don't have to type out. Here, let me close the folders and let me format. Let's save and preview. Now, the reason why you can't see anything on this section is because this section has opacity set to 0. And later we'll use GSAP to add fade-in effect here. So let's remove the opacity so we can see it actually. Let's open our index.css file and let's search for sound section. And let's find the opacity 0 and let's comment this out. So now if we save it, close this file, close the folder, and let's see again. And there you go. We just need to fix this typo and add a button and a link. So let's do that. Here there's a typo, should be field. And here after the description, let's add an ordered list with the links. Let's add a class name of just links. And let's add a first list item. Inside of this one, we're going to have a button, similar like on the jumbotron. Text will be just by. And let's add a class name of button. Simple as that. Now let's add additional list item. For the second one, we're going to have a link. So add an anchor element and let's add a class name of link. The text is going to be learn more. Now let's format the document and let's preview. There you go. This is the final version of this section, except that we're going to have iPhone here once we add our 3D object. And this learn more button, we're going to implement scrolling once we add the next section. But since we added this section, we can implement actually this one. So once we click on the learn more, we want the page to scroll down to this section. So let's do that. So let's open the jumbotron component, and here on the top, let's add a function. Name this function handle learn more. This is a fat arrow function. First we want to target our sound section. So use the document.query selector, and then let's target the sound section. And we want to store this inside of the constant named element. We want to take the top position of this element and scroll down. So let's use the window.scrollTo method. This method takes an object as argument, and this object receives a couple of parameters. The first one is the top position. And then we can use our element from the document query selector and call the getBoundingClientRect. Call this method. This method will return the position, and we want to access the top position. And let's add an optional chaining operator, which basically says if this element is undefined, don't execute this function. So this component doesn't get an error. The next property is the left. We want to set the left to 0, as we don't need any horizontal scrolling. And the last property is behavior, which we are going to set to smooth, so that we have smooth scrolling. So let's use this method that we just created, or rather function. And here on the learn more, let's add onClick method. And let's pass this function. And now let's try this. Let's scroll up to the jumbotron section, and once we click on the learn more, boom, we get scroll down here. And now let's build the last section of this website. So if I go over to the final version, and if you click on the learn more, you can see that we got scroll down to this brilliant display section. Let's build that one. So let's get back to the Visual Studio Code. Let's close these files and let's add a new file in the components folder. So new file, and name this file as display section.jsx. Again, let's import React using the code snippet, and then let's generate new functional component. This one is going to be called display section. Let's add placeholder text, and let's import in the app.jsx file. So let's import it first. Import display section from components/display section, and let's place it next to the sound section. So just place the display section component and make it a self-closing tag. Save this, close the app.jsx file, and let's preview. There's no errors in the component. We get the hello here on the bottom left, and let's add all the components, or actually the elements that we need. Let's remove this placeholder text and let's add a div. This div will have a class name of display section, and also let's add a wrapper class as well. Similar to other section, let's add h2 tag and a class name of title. The text is going to be new, and below this text let's add a paragraph with a class name of text, and here we're gonna say brilliant with a dot, and let's add a span with a class name of description, and let me copy paste the text as it's a little bit longer. So let me open the final version and let me just copy this text. Okay, let me close that and let me paste the text here. I will close the folder and let me format the document so it's more readable. And below that, let's add the button. So again, similar to other sections, we want to have two buttons. The first one is going to say try me, and here we're going to have a class name of a button simply. The second button is going to be called top, and the class name is going to be back button. The first button is going to trigger the preview mode of the 3D model object, and the second one is just going to be scroll back to top. So let's save and see what we have. So let's scroll down, and once again this section is invisible because we have set opacity to 0, and we're going to use the GSAP to animate and fade in later. So let's remove that opacity rule from the index file. So open the index.css file and let's search for the display section. And let's find the opacity and let's remove this. Just comment out. Now if we save this and close it, we should get our text. Beautiful. Now we're just missing that 3D model, which is actually the most interesting part of this tutorial. We're going to be using WebGi viewer to display this 3D model to our website, which is powered by ThreeJS. And then we're going to be using the GSAP to animate this model through the different sections of our website. The 3D model is already presented in our repository. If you open the public folder, you can find it here, scene-black.glb. But in case you want to find some additionals or different models, I will show you where you can find them. There are plenty of websites with 3D models, but I found my model here on the sketchfab.com. And this is the model that we are going to be using in this tutorial. As you may see, this is iPhone 13 Pro Max, but it will serve the purpose. You can browse this website to find different models. For example, we can type here keyboard, and then you get a set of different 3D models. And then when you find the one that you want, you can just download them. So as you can see here on the bottom, you have download 3D model. The format that we need is GLB. So just click on the download here. And this model is free, but you need to give attribution to the authors. Once you download the file, you need to go over to this WebGi website, and the links to all the websites are going to be in the description. Here we can open this online viewer for these 3D models. Just click on the latest version here. And then we can open even newer version and just click on OK. And now what we can do is we can just open up our 3D model and import in the viewer here. And there you go. In this viewer, there are a couple of things that might be very useful. As you may see here, we have this 3D reflection. And on our website, we don't have that because you want this object maybe to not have the ground or reflection. So how you can remove it is just go to here to the scene and you have ground. And you can just uncheck the visible. And there you go. Also, here you will be defining the initial position of the actual 3D model on your website. How you do that is actually go here to the animations and you have camera views. And then you can find the camera angle that you like and you can just click on add current view and it gets saved here. Then if you want a second view, for example, let's just rotate it like this maybe and click add current view. Now you can rotate through these views that you just saved. So just focus on next and there you go. So again, this is very important. So this is how it's going to appear on your website once you load this file. Once you set your the first position that you want to go here to the export and you have here assets export and GLB export because we're going to be using this GLB file. And also you want to click here on the drag or compress and you just click on the export GLB. We're not going to be exporting this file because we're going to use the iPhone that I have found, and I also already optimized this asset for you guys. So basically I just removed the ground. So if I go to the scene, I just removed the ground and I just compressed it. Also I added the first position of the actual 3D model. And additionally, what's important is this position and this target values, because these are the values that we are going to be animating or changing using the GSAP library to rotate and animate our 3D model. So let's do that. So let's add a new component. Close this public folder, and inside of the components, let's add a new file. And name of this file is going to be WebGi viewer.jsx. Now let's import React from the top and let's create new functional component. And this one is going to be called WebGi viewer. And here in the return statement, let's add a div. And let's add an ID here. ID is going to be WebGi-canvas-container. And we're going to use this ID to apply some styles to this container. And inside of this div, let's add a canvas. Let's add an ID. And the ID is WebGi-canvas. And let's add a ref. We're going to render our 3D model inside of this canvas. And we're going to use this ref as a reference, so as a place where we can render the 3D model as well. And for the ID, we're going to use to apply some styles. So let's import ref on the top. So import use ref from React. If you're unfamiliar with use ref hook, all this hook does is it gets reference to an HTML element, and then you can perform DOM manipulations using this reference. So let's call this hook inside of our component. So just call use ref and set the value as null. This is the initial value and it will return a reference. So we want to store that inside of the canvas ref. This is the name of our reference. And now we can use this reference and pass this to the ref parameter of our canvas. And then we're going to be using this canvas ref to initialize the 3D model and render it inside of this ref. Next, the great thing about WebGi is that they have a starter code for us, so we actually start developing faster. So if you click here on the Get Started, here if you scroll a little bit down, you have this WebGi starter template on the GitHub. So click on that link and you get redirected to the GitHub WebGi vanilla starter. This is great, but we cannot reuse this entire project because we are building this in React, and this is vanilla starter project. So we're just going to borrow some of the code. So go to the source folder and go to the index.ts file. First, let's copy the imports they have in this file. So copy that, and let's head over to WebGi viewer, and let's paste this. And these are all the plugins that you use in the WebGi viewer to apply some different effects and achieve some different styles. So let's remove the ones that we are not going to be using. We are not going to be using timeout. We also don't need this diamond plugin. Let's remove this frame fade plugin as well. Let's remove this one, GLTF animation plugin. We don't even need this ground plugin either. We need this bloom. We don't need this temporal plugin. We can remove this one as well. We need this one, and we can use this one as well. For the rest of this one we can remove. And let's add a couple of these that we're gonna actually be using in our application. Mobile and tablet check. So this one we're gonna be using to check if you're on mobile or tablet so that we can optimize the position of our models. Now let's format this and let's add additional imports once we are here. So here, let's add additional hooks that we're gonna be using. So we're gonna need use state hook as well. We're gonna need use callback. We're gonna need forward ref and use imperative handle as well. For animating all of this, we're gonna use GSAP. So import GSAP from GSAP, and let's import scroll trigger. So import scroll trigger from GSAP scroll trigger. Instead of all, it needs to be scroll trigger like this. Now let's copy the setup function. Scroll a little bit down, and here, async function. This function initializes the viewer. So let's just copy it and adjust it to our needs for React. Here, just copy, and let's paste it inside of our function here. Let's first check what this code does. We can see here that this is asynchronous function. And on the next line, we are initializing the viewer. So we call the new viewer app method, and we are saving that into the viewer constant. And then we're passing the canvas argument. And here they are using this document that get element by ID, but actually we're going to use the canvas ref that we just created. So we can just replace that. canvasref.current. Next, they're adding some basic plugins here using this add plugin method on the viewer, and they're storing these values in the manager. Following that, they're adding a pop-up here to show the download progress. We can remove this one as we don't want this to be displayed. Next, they're adding some base plugins using the viewer. And once all the plugins have been added, they are calling this viewer.renderer refresh pipeline. So basically to load all the plugins. And then below that, they're adding the 3D model from the path. Let's update this. For us, it's going to be scene-black.glb because we are running this from the public folder. And at the bottom, they're adding some additional UI plugins. These plugins would add an interface to your website, like UI panel, which you can use to update and modify your 3D model on the website. But that's not what we want, so let's remove that. And since we're going to have a lot of re-rendering on this component, I want to cache this function using the useCallback hook. This way, it's not going to be recreated every single time that we re-render our component. So let's remove that and let's call the useCallback. useCallback hook expects an async function, and at the end we provide the list of the dependencies when we want to recreate this function. but it's going to be empty because we don't want to recreate this function. Now let's just copy the function that we already have here and replace the one inside of the use callback function, or actually hook. Now let's format this document. Actually, we are missing the equal sign here. And now we can format the document and let's preview. But before we can preview, we actually need to call this function, and we can do that inside of the use effect hook. So in use effect, we will just call this setup viewer function, and we want to do this only once. So pass an empty array of dependency lists. Now let's save this and let's preview. So let's open the app.jsx file and let's import this component. Here in the import section, type in import WebGi viewer from components/WebGi viewer, and let's display it here. Make it a self-closing tag, similar to others. So let's save. And let's open our website. But actually see that we have an error. So let's open up the console. And inside of the console, we have this canvas snip plugin is not defined. So probably we are missing the import. Let's go back and let's add it. So here in the WebGi viewer, we are adding this plugin, but we are probably not importing it. So let's add it here in the import section. Let's save it and let's refresh. And boom, as you saw for a second, let me just refresh it. There you go. This is our phone. But now we need to adjust the animation. So this is the initial position. And also we need to clip the background because this phone has a black background which is covering our navigation on top. So let's do that. So here in WebGi viewer, let's scroll a little bit down after the import here of the manager. So let's add viewer.getPlugin. And the plugin that we need to do this is tone map plugin. And we're going to set the configuration. And the clip background is the property that we want to update. We want to clip the background and set just to true. And if we save this in preview, you can see that now we see our background, and actually background is transparent and we can see the navigation on top. So now let's do a little bit of cleanup of this file because there's a lot of comments that we don't need, and we can remove that and add the stuff that we need. Let's remove this comment here. I will remove this one as well here. And let's add some plugins that we have imported. So we need this one, GB buffer plugin. Let's uncomment all of these because we will need them as well. We also need this bloom plugin. So adding these plugins change the appearance of the 3D model, and we're only including the ones that we need. Okay. We are not adding the base plugins anymore because we are adding them individually. And here we also need to remove this one because we are adding again the plugins individually. I can remove this comment. And let me see on the import section. So we don't need any more added base plugins. And we don't need this canvas snipper plugin either. This one we're going to be using later to determine whether we are on tablet, mobile, or desktop. Let's clean up a little bit more as well. We don't need any of these comments. And now let's add one more command. So I want to disable the controls once we load our viewer. So set the viewer scene dot active camera dot set camera options. So here we want to set the camera options and we want to use controls enabled, and I want to set it to false. So what it means is we are disabling the controls so the users are not able to rotate the 3D model once the website is loaded. Next, whenever we reload our website, I want the position of our page to be on top. So let's add window.scroll2 and set the top and left to 0. so that we are always at the top position of our website, and we can start with the animation. Now I want to add an event listener to the viewer itself. What this listener will do once it's fired off, it will update the position of the camera if update is needed. So type the following: viewer.add-event-listener, and the name of the listener is pre-frame. Once that fired off, we want to execute this callback function. And here we want to update our camera. But in order to update our camera, we actually need to get our active camera first. So we do that here. Before all these plugins that you're adding here, let's add new constant. And here we will save our camera. So we access the camera by viewer.scene.activeCamera. And using this camera, we can access the position and the target. So let's do that as well. So const position equals the camera dot position, and the target is const dot target is equal to camera dot target. Using these three properties that we just got from the camera and the viewer, we're gonna modify and animate our 3D model, because changing the view and the target and the position of that, you're actually getting that 3D rotation animation model. So let's update the camera here. And once this event listener has been fired off, we want to call camera.positionTarget updated and set that to true. But we want only to update this in certain conditions. So let's create a variable and name it as needs update and set it to, let's just make sure that spelling is correct, needs update, and set that to true. And we want to make a check inside of the listener. If it needs update, then we want to update the camera position and set the flag to the false, like so. Let's format the document and let's save, and let's see if we have any errors so far. And as you can see, the background clip doesn't work anymore. So let's fix that. The issue is probably with the tone mapping plugin, because it adds some stuff which disables the transparency. So let's remove this argument and let's just add true. Save that and let's preview again. And this works correctly now. So now what we want to do is, once we click on the learn more, we want this mobile to rotate and to set into this position here. So let me just zoom out a little bit. So it's at 100%. And once we click on the learn more, it will rotate and move on the right side here. So let's do that. We are going to be using GSAP, and we already imported the GSAP and the scroll trigger plugin. So let's register that plugin. Call the GSAP.register plugin and just pass in the name of the scroll, because this is the animation that is going to be triggered on the scroll itself. Now I want to create a new file where I will be saving this animation, as I want to break down this file because it's becoming very large. So add a new folder inside of this source folder and name this one as lib, which stands for library. And let's add a new file. The name of this file is going to be scroll-animation.js. First, we will need GSAP here as well. So import GSAP from GSAP, like so. Let's create a scroll animation function and export it. So type in export const scroll animation. This is going to be a fat arrow function. And here we're going to receive some of the arguments. So first we're going to receive the camera position, then camera target, then we're going to receive on update. We are going to be using this method to update the position of the camera. Every time we update the parameters of our camera, we will call this method to update it and re-render. So let's create a new timeline for the GSAP. So let's create TL for timeline and let's execute the jsap.timeline function. But before we add the animation, let's first import this function inside of the WebGi viewer and pass all the arguments that we need for the animation so that we can see what we are changing while we are coding the animation. So let's import the function here on the top and make sure actually to save the file here first, and then import scroll animation from lib/scroll-animation. And again, as we don't want to re-render and recreate this animation function on every render, let's use a callback to cache it and memoize it. So add a new variable, const memoized scroll animation, and we're going to use callback again to memoize this function. Here we're going to receive position, target, and onUpdate. And we're just going to check if these three exist. So if we have position and we have target and we have onUpdate, then we want to call our scroll animation function and pass all the three arguments here. And we want to execute this only once, so pass the empty array of the dependencies. And now let's call this function here on the very end. After the event listener, let's call our function, and now let's pass the arguments. So first we want to pass the position. This is the position of the camera, and we define it here. Here we define the position and the target of the camera. So we're passing in the position and the target. And the last one is we need to create new onUpdate method for updating our camera view. So let's create it, const onUpdate. This is a simple fat arrow function, and we just want to update this needs update here. Set it to true, and we want to mark the camera, or actually the viewer, as dirty. So viewer.setDirty. This basically says that the camera and the viewer needs to be updated. That's all it does. And now let's pass this method here to the memoized scroll animation. There you go. And now let's go back to the scroll animation.js file, and let's start with our animation here. And now on the GSAP timeline, we want to execute two functions. So this function takes the parameters of what we want to animate. But first we want to animate the position of the camera. And as a second argument, it receives an object. And inside of this object, we want to define a trigger, what will trigger the animation, and the properties that we want to change. For us, in this animation, when we are scrolling, we are starting the animation. So set the scroll trigger property, and we define here a new object. Inside of this object, the first property that you want to define is the actual trigger. So this needs to be the element that is triggering this animation, the element in the DOM itself. For us, this is the sound section. So type in the sound section. And where I found this class, let me show you. So if we go to our browser, if we inspect developer tools, you can see here that we have this sound section, and this is the second section here, this one. So we want this section to trigger the animation. The next property is when we want to start the trigger. So type in start, and we want to start when the top of this section hits the bottom of the viewport. So let me just show you what I mean by that. Let me close the browser console tools, and here, this is the top section of the sound system. This right here, this line. And the bottom part of the viewport is this. So this is static actually. This top line is static. It's always there. But the bottom of the viewport is changing once we start scrolling. So when we start scrolling, it's changing. And basically, at this first scroll, this is already reached the top. And this is when we want to fire off our animation. Here also we need to define what will end the animation. So we set the end property when the top of the sound section, this, reaches the top of the viewport. So again, let's review that. top of the viewport is right here. And the top of the sound section is right here. So when these two meet, we reached the end of the animation. So if we scroll, and when we reach this position, when the top of the viewport reaches the top of this sound section, the animation should be ended. And now if we update our position, camera position, and we leave it like that, we will only have the start and end position, and there will not be any transition in between. So we need to use the scrub property. We can set the scrub to true. This way, the 3D model will be changing its position from start to the end position using the scroll position. But if you want to add a little bit of delay, you can add numbers here. So I tried a couple of numbers and I found that 2 works the best. As this animation is very heavy on our browser, we need to do a little bit of implementation for the performance. So we can pass in immediate render as false. This means that we are not going to try to render this animation until it's actually triggered. And once the animation is done, we want to call this onUpdate method. And if you don't remember what this method does, so let's go back here. All this method does, it sets this flag to true and sets the viewer to set dirty. So it means the viewer needs to be updated. And then we trigger this event listener, and then camera position gets updated here. And now we need to set the values that we are going to be changing. So we have X, Y, and Z. And where we get these values is from the WebGi viewer. So let's do that. So we need to open the WebGi viewer, and then you need to import the 3D model that you're going to be using in your application. To get the position of camera, you need to go to the animations, and then what you want to do is you want to position the 3D model the way you want it to look. So you basically want to position the end position for your 3D model. Once you do that, you can go and click here on Add Current View. A new camera view has been added here in the list. You can expand that, and you can see that here we got the position of the camera and target of the camera. So we have the X, Y, Z values, and we can use these values to animate and add them to the GSAP. So this animation will have this position as end. And once you add all the position that you want, you can basically just go and keep rotating the animation. And that's all we want to do in our application, to rotate the views that we saved in our GLB file and retrieve this information and store them in the GSAP animation function. So let's do that. I already tested the positions that I want for my mobile 3D model, so let's just type them in. The X position should be minus 3.38. The Y position should be minus 10.74. And the Z should be minus 5.93. And now I want to execute exactly the same function, but on the camera target. So we can reuse this code. Just add this function here. And for the second one, we want to remove the onUpdate because it's enough to call this function only once. And we want to update the element is target here. Now let's update the values that we got for the target. For the X, it's going to be 1.52. For the Y, we're going to set 0.77. And for the Z, let's set minus 1.08. And again, I'm not coming up with these numbers randomly, but I was playing around with the 3D model, and I found that this position is the position that I want to have at the end of this animation. So let's save this and let's try it out. Let's open the browser, and if you click on the Learn More, boom, we get our animation. And if you scroll up, the animation starts as well. The problem is here that, as you can see, that this image is covering our 3D model. So what we can do is we can change the opacity and fade out this all content. I mean, the other solution could be that we place the 3D model on top of this content, but I would like to fade in anyways. So let's do that. Again, we can reuse the same function that we called. So let me just copy paste this. And now the target is going to be the jumbotron section. So let's type in jumbotron -section. And here we don't want to update any positions, but actually we want to fade out. So set the opacity to 0, like so. The trigger will remain the same. So let's try that. And now if we scroll, it's actually not working. So let me check if the selector is correct. So as you can see here, we're missing O. So it should be jumbotron -section. So if we go back and if we inspect this section, so let me just show you. You can see that this is the target, CSS target that we want to use. Okay, let's try now. We scroll, now you can see that it's fading away and we get this nice effect. But what we also want to do is we want to fade in this new sound system. So this section should be fading as well. So let's do that. First, let's open index.css file and let's find the not display section, but actually we want sound section. Sound-section. And let's find here opacity. So we want to set the initial opacity to be 0. And as you can see here, when we get to that position, we don't see anything, but now we want to fade in. So let's add the fade in animation. So here we can reuse again the same code. So we'll just copy this function and paste. And this time we want to trigger sound section content, or actually we want to animate the sound section content. And the trigger is again sound section. Here we want to set the opacity to 1 because we want to fade in. The rest of the animation should remain the same. So let's try now. Let's save and let's reload and click on learn more. And there you go. You see how it's animating once we start scrolling down. Here it's semi-transparent, and when we reach the final position, it's fully solid. Great. So let's continue. Now we want to add the last piece of the puzzle. So once we click on the learn more here, we want to get scroll to the bottom and we want to animate. But as you can see, we haven't implemented this scroll at all. So let's go back to this field-based sound system section and let's implement this first, learn more, and then we can animate this phone. So let's do that. Let me close all these files and let's open the sound section here. I want to add new function and let's name this function as const handle learn more, and this is going to be fat arrow function. First we want to get a reference to the last section and we can store that inside of the element. So define const element and then using the document query selector we can target the display section, which is the last section. So let me show you. So right click and let's inspect. And you can see this is the display section, which is the last section of the website, which we want to target. Okay. And now we want to scroll to that element. So call the window.scroll_to and pass in an object with the parameters. For the top, we want to use the element and we want to get bound client rect, and we want a bottom position of it. We want to set the left to 0 because we don't have any horizontal scroll, and for the behavior we want to set to smooth. And let's use this method, or actually function, and pass it here to learn more. So define new event handler, on click and just pass this function. Let's try it out. So scroll a little bit up and let's click on the learn more, and there you go. Beautiful. Now we should add the animation for this 3D model. So let's open our lib scroll animation.js file, and again we can reuse this this entire function. So we actually can copy the both of these position, because we're gonna update the position and the target as well for the third animation. First, we need to update the trigger because the trigger right now is the last section. So display dash section. It's not the sound section anymore. So the same for the last one. And now let's just update the values. So for X, 1.56, for Y, 5.0, and for Z, 0.01. And for the target, X is going to be minus 0.55, 0.32 for Y, and for the Z, we want to set 0.0, like so. Let's save, and let's see what we have. If we click on the first Learn More, we get animation to the second section, and if you click on the next Learn More, we get the animation for the last section. Beautiful! And you see how easy it is to add this animation effect using GSAP and ThreeJS. And you can also do the custom scrolling, and you can see that the animation is changing while we are scrolling. This is just outstanding. The only thing that I want here is I want this section to fade in as well. So let's add this animation. We can actually reuse the animation from the sound section. So let's just copy that. And let's add it here on the bottom. Here I just want to change the target. For the last section, it's going to be display section without the content here. And let's update the trigger as well. It is also display section, like so. Let me save, and let's see. Once again, click on the Learn More here, but actually we forgot to set the opacity initially to 0. So let's find the display section. If I can write it correctly, and let's find it here. So set the opacity to 0 initially. Let's save it and let's try. So let's refresh the page. Click on the Learn More once again, and there you go. You have this nice animation fade in. As you can see, it's semi-transparent here, and once we start scrolling, it gets fully visible and solid. Beautiful. The next thing that I want to do is I want to implement this try me to get that preview mode where you can play around with this 3D model. And I want to implement this top so that we can scroll to the top of the page. So let's first implement this top because it's the easiest one. Let's first close all these files. Close all these files, and let's open the display section here. Let's add another function, and let's name this function as handle scroll to top. And this is going to be fat arrow function again. And all we want to do is to scroll to top. So use the window dot scroll to, and we want to set the top to 0, left to 0, and set the behavior to smooth, like so. And now we can use this function and pass to this button. So let's call the onClick event and pass this function. Beautiful. Let's try it. So if we click on top, nice. That's exactly what we wanted to do. Now let's implement this try me preview mode. So what we need to do is we need to add onClick event listener on this button. And once we click on this button, we want to fire a function from the parent component. Parent component is app.jsx file here. And then inside of this function, we want to fire off another function. And that last function is going to be inside of this WebGi viewer. So let's start from that. In order to reference a function from this component, we need to use forward ref use hook. So let's rename this function to use this hook. So instead of the function, let's write const WebGi viewer, and we're going to use forward ref. And forward ref takes two arguments. The first one is the properties, and the second one is the reference. And we just need to wrap our component with this forward ref hook. So let's copy the component and let's place it in here. And now what we need to do is we need to use imperative handler hook. So let's write here, use imperative handler hook, and inside of this hook we're going to define what is the function that we're going to trigger from the app component. So here we receive fed arrow function, and the name of the function can be trigger preview. And in order to enable this animation, we basically need to have the reference to the camera, to the target, to the position, all these informations. And this is inside of the setup viewer. So we need to create another variable and store all of this inside of the variable so that we can access them inside of this trigger preview. So let's add the reference to them. We will use useStateHook for that. So let's create first one, const viewer ref. This is the name of our variable that we're going to use to store the viewer. Now let's set the setter function. So set viewer ref, and just use the useStateHook to set the initial value to 0, or actually to null. Let's copy paste this a couple of times because we're going to do the same for the target. So copy the target, and here we want to set the set function as set target ref, and then we want to update the third one, which is for the camera, and update the setter function. Should be set camera ref. The next one is position ref, and the setter function is set position ref, like so. And now we can use these variables and use the GSAP to change the position of our camera. Because as you can see on the last position, this is the camera, or actually 3D model position. When we click on try me, we want to change the position of this phone to face us and be a little bit smaller, something like similar like here, or actually on the first position, something more similar like this position. So that's what we are going to be doing. So let's call the GSAP .to. This is the function again, and we are now changing the position ref, and we want to pass in x, again x, y, and z, and the values are going to be for x 13.04, for y it's going to be minus 2.01, and for the z it's going to be 2.29. And for the duration, let's set it duration to 2. And at the end, we want to call onUpdate because we want to update the position once we set the values. We actually want to re-render the camera view and 3D model. So call the onUpdate, which receives a function as a callback. And we want to set the viewer ref to be dirty. Set dirty. So this means that we are marking the viewer for rendering. And then let's call the camera ref position target updated and set it to true. So basically we're saying that the position of the target has been updated. And we need to do the same for the target. So again, let's call GSAP.to, and this time we need target ref, and again the position for x is going to be 0.11, for the y is going to be 0.0, for the z is going to be 0.0, and set the duration to be 2. Just make sure to put the colon in between. And now we should be able to call this function from the parent. So let me open the app.jsx, and first we need to create a useRef reference to this function. So useRef, call this one, and let's store that inside of the const WebGi viewer ref. And now we can connect our reference to the component. So use the ref property, and let's just pass this object that we created, like so. And now let's define a new function that will be triggering from this display section. Let's name it handler preview. It is going to be a fat arrow function, and we're going to access the method from the WebGi viewer. So access the ref dot current, and the name of the function that we define here is trigger preview, like so. And we are going to trigger this function from the display section. So let's add another property and call it trigger preview, and let's just pass the handler preview function. Now let's call this trigger preview property inside of the display section here, and make sure to destructure it. Now let's add an event handler here on try me button. So let's add onClick and just call this function. Let's format the document. Let's save this one. Let's format this one. And actually, let's format this one as well. Let's save all of them and let's try. And obviously, we have an error. So let's inspect to see what's happening. And we have useRef is not defined. So let's import useRef. So here in the app.jsx, let's import useRef hook from the React. Let's save it. And let's try now. So now our application is not broken anymore. So let's try me. But it's not working for some reason. So let me inspect. Let's see the console. And I cannot read properties of null inside of the WebGi viewer. Okay, so we are actually not storing these values, viewer ref, camera ref, and position ref, and target ref. We only created these values, but we never assigned them. So let's do that. We forgot this step. Let's close this. Let's open the WebGi viewer. And here, let's scroll a bit down. Here we are setting the viewer. Let's initialize and store it inside of our variable. So set viewer ref and just pass in the viewer. And now let's do the same for the camera. So let's find where the camera is. Okay, so it's here, camera position and target. So let's call it set camera ref and pass in the camera. Then we want to set position ref and pass in the position, and set the target ref and pass in the target, like so. We are basically calling this set function and storing the reference to these variables so that we can use them inside of this trigger preview. Just for a reminder. Okay, let's try now. Let's scroll down and let's scroll to the end, and now let's click on try me. And there you go. We have animated this 3D model iPhone to have this front-facing position. The next thing that I want to do is I want to enable this to be rotated, and I want to hide all these things behind this iPhone. So let's do that. Let's open the app.jsx file, and let's add a container here for all of these sections so we can hide them. So let's add another div, and let's add ID of content, and let's add a reference. So add a ref, and let's make a new reference. Let's call this one as content ref, and call the useRef hook again. So we're gonna use this ref to hide all this content. So pass the ref variable to this content, and let's move in all these sections here. So what we are gonna do is just to fade away all these sections once we are in a preview mode, and that's it. And this WebGi viewer will be only viewable on the website. So let's do that. Let's pass this reference to the WebGi viewer, add new property, and call this one content ref, and just pass in the content ref here. Now let's open the WebGi viewer component. Now let's just access this content ref from the properties. So call the props.contentRef, set the current, style, and opacity to 0, like so. So let's try that. And now if we scroll to the bottom of the website, and let's click on the Try Me, we can see that all elements have disappeared apart from the 3D model. Now we want to be able to rotate this model, but at the moment the pointer events are disabled for this section. So if you go to the canvas, you can see the pointer events are set to none. So we want to fix this and to enable rotation. So let's do that. So let's add another reference to the container of the canvas. Let's store it inside of the constant, and let's call this one canvas container ref. And again, we're going to use ref hook, and the initial value is going to be null. Now we want to pass this to our canvas container. So scroll down to the canvas, and let's use the ref and pass this reference here. Now we can use this to update it once we call the trigger preview. So here, let's call it, and let's add the current.style.pointer events and equals to all. This will remove the pointer events rule that we set earlier, but what we also need to do is we want to set and enable the 3D model to be rotated. So we do that here. Let's set the viewer ref.scene.activeCamera and set camera options. We want to reset this back to controls enabled to true, and this will enable the rotation of the 3D model. So let's save it and let's preview. Let's scroll to the bottom of the page. Once again, let's click Try Me, and let's try to roll. And there you go. Now we're able to control the 3D model. How exciting is this? You can zoom in, zoom out, change the position, do whatever you want and inspect this 3D model. This is outstanding. But there is one problem. We cannot exit this preview mode. So we need to add another button here. And once we click on the button, we want to close this preview mode and return everything back to the normal. So let's do that. So we need to create another flag variable to be able to distinguish when we are in preview mode and we are not. So define const in the array preview mode and set preview mode. We're going to use the useState hook and set the initial value to be false. So at the beginning we are not in the preview mode. And now when we call this trigger preview method, or function rather, we want to set this preview mode to be true. So call the set preview mode and pass in true. And now depending on this mode, we want to show or hide the button that we're going to add here in the container. So let's add expression and let's see if the preview mode is true. If it's true, we want to render this button. So add a button, and this button will just say exit. Let's set a class name of simply button, like so. Let's save it, and let's see what we got here. So refresh the page. Let's scroll to the bottom of the page. Click on the Try Me, and there you go. Now let's implement the exit. So let's add a new onClick event handler on the exit button. So onClick, and we will create new function. Now let's call this function handle exit, like so. And let's define it here. So after the hook here, and we're gonna use callback because let's save it, and we don't want to recreate this function all over again whenever we're rendering the component. So we're calling this one as handle exit, and we're gonna use callback hook. And we're going to receive this function inside of it, and we're going to pass an array of dependencies later. So what we want to do in this function is we want to reset the state that we set here in this trigger preview. So we can reuse the code that we defined here. Let's copy this one and let's paste it here. We want to set the pointer events back to none. And we want to set the opacity of the content ref to 1. as well. And also we want to disable here controls for the rotating the 3D model. So let's reset them back. Set the controls enabled to false. Let's also set the preview mode to false so that we hide the button. And now we need to position our iPhone or 3D model back to its original position. And we already defined this position inside of the lib scroll animation, so we can reuse that code. So you're going to find the target and the opacity, or actually this is for the display section. So here, the target and the position. So let's copy this and let's paste it here. Call the GSAP and call it to, or actually we copy it to method as well. Let me just close the folders and let me format this. And let's just update the position, because here we are using the reference to the position. And also let's update the target to ref. And let's update this method on update method. So we need to define that. Let's pass in a function, and inside of this function we're going to call viewRef, and we're going to set 30. Again, something similar that we already did. And we want to call the camera ref and set the position target updated to true, like so. And we want to update this function only when certain dependencies are updated. So canvas container ref, viewer ref, position ref, camera ref, and target ref. And let's just not forget to call the GSAP on the second animation as well. And we can close the previous one. Perfect. Let's save this and let's preview. Let's open the browser. Let's scroll to the bottom of our page and let's click on Try Me. Now we are in preview mode, so we can scroll, play around, or actually rotate, and click on the exit, and boom, we are back at the initial position. We can open the preview mode when we want, zoom in, play around, do whatever we want, and click on the exit, and we're back. Excellent. And the next thing that I want to do is optimize this for mobile devices. So let's open the console tools. So inspect, and let's open up the simulator here on the right top. Let's refresh. And as you can see, this doesn't look correct. So we want to update the positions of our 3D model. So let's do that. We already are importing function to help us to determine this, mobile and tablet check. So let's add another flag which will be used to store the results of the mobile and tablet check. So let's add a flag, type in const isMobile, and the setter function will be set isMobile. And we're going to use useStateHook, obviously, to store the state, and set to null first. Next, in setupViewer, here next to the setViewerRef, we want to call this function. So mobile and tablet check, and we want to store the result in a constant. Name this one is mobile or tablet, like so. And to be able to access this variable outside of this function, we want to store that to our state variable. So set is mobile as well to this constant. So now we can access that through the entire functional component that we have here. And now let's scroll a little bit down. And here below this controls that we're disabling controls, we want to check if is mobile or tablet. If it is, we want to reset the position and target to fit the mobile phone. So use the position to set to -16.7. The second one is going to be 1.17 and the third one 11.7. Again, I was playing around with this positions and these values to set the one that corresponds to the resolution that I need for the mobile phone. Then we want to set the target as well. Set the first to 0 for the X. For Y, set the 1.37, and the last one set to 0. And we want to add additional class to our content ref. So use the props.content_ref.current.className and set the class to mobile-or-tablet. Using this class, we're going to hide the elements that we don't need on the mobile phone. So let's save and see if this fixed our initial position. And there you go, it is. But if we scroll down, we can see that the second position and probably the third one are not working as expected. So let's fix them. So we want to pass this flag to mem-wise scroll animation as well. So let's pass here is mobile or tablet, like so. And let's accept it here. Add it here as a property, or actually as an argument, is mobile. And we want to send it here as well, so that we are able to update the positions. Okay, and now we can open this inside of our scroll animation. So let's save this. Let's format this document. And let's open up the scroll animation here. So we are receiving another argument here. And we call it is mobile, like so. And now let's update these values. So let's use the ternary operator to make this more simple. So let's just check, is this not mobile? If it's not, remain the values as they are. If it is, let's add the new value. For the first X, it's going to be -7. Then let's do the same for the add values. For the second one, if it's on mobile, we want to set -12.2, like so. For the third one, we're going to set -6.0. Let's do the same for the target here. If it's not on mobile, remain the same, otherwise set 0.7. For the Y, let's set the value to be 1.9. And for the last one, let's set it to be 0.7. Okay, let's save. Now let's update for the last section. Again, we want to add this ternary operator. And for the second one, we're going to add 9.50, or actually 36, sorry. For the Y, we want to add a value of 10.95 if it's on mobile. And for the set, we want to set a position to be 0.09 on mobile. And let's set the target for the display section as well here. If we are on the mobile, we want to set the position to be -1.62. Then for the Y, we want to set position to be 0.02. And for the last one, we want to set position to be -0.06. Let's save this and let's see what we got. Let's open the browser and let's refresh the page. And if you click on the Learn More, we can see that we got the correct position for the second section. And let's see on the last section. Great, this looks awesome. So what if we click on Try Me? Okay, this looks a little bit different, but if we click on the exit, we can see that this value remained the same. So let's update that one. Let's open the WebGi viewer, and we do that here in the handle exit function. So again, let's add this ternary operator, and let's check if it's not on mobile. We're setting this value as it is, but if it's on mobile, we want to set 9.36. For the second one, we're gonna set 10.95. For the last one, it's going to be 0.09. This is for the position, and for the target, let's have it as well. So we're gonna say -6.62 for the Y, let's set 0.02, and for the last z, let's set the value to be minus 0.06, like so. Let's save and let's format again. Actually, we have this L, we don't need that, so let's remove the L, and once again let's format, and let's preview what we have. And once again, let's scroll to the bottom of our website. Let's click on Try Me. This looks fine, and let's click on the exit, and boom, we are back at the right position. Outstanding. So let's scroll to the top, and the last piece of the puzzle and the last piece of the website that I want to add is the loader, because this animation is very, very heavy on the performance of the website itself. So we want to give some time the website and the assets to load in and display some nice animation for the user as well, so they don't have to, just see and wait and look at the blank. So let's do that. Let's close all these files and let's add a new component in the component section. So add a new file and name this file as loader.jsx. Let's import React on top, and let's create functional component. Name it loader. Here we're just gonna import a GIF image and display that. So let's import animated logo from assets / images / logo -animated .gif. So this is already placed in the assets folder, we just needed to load it. And in the return statement, let's add a div. And this div has a class name of loader. And let's add an image. Let's add a class name of logo. Let's add a source of animated logo. And let's add an alt. And set that one to iPhone loader. Or actually Apple. Maybe it's the better, because we have multiple devices on the loading animation. So let's save this and let's import this inside of the app.jsx file. Let's import it in the import section here. Import loader from components / loader, and let's place it here and make it a self-closing tag. Let's save and see what we have. Now let's reload the page, and boom, we have this nice loading animation, and after a couple of seconds it fades away. If you're wondering how this fade away animation is being done, let me show you. So let's open the index.css file and let's find this. Let's search for -loader class, and as you can see, I'm using the animation called fade out, and this is just a simple CSS animation. So we are fading from opacity 1 to opacity 0. And we are holding this GIF for 3 seconds, and after 3 seconds we are firing this animation, which actually fades away in 0.3 seconds. And that's all it does. And with that, we completed our website. Now let's build and deploy this project. So head over to our Visual Studio Code and let's open up the terminal. I want to open another terminal, and let's actually open up a bash. Let's close the PowerShell and let's close the first bash. And now simply just run npm run build. Make sure to spell it correctly. And this will build a static folder for us, and we can use this folder to upload to the hosting. And it's done. That was very fast. And as you can see, we have this dist folder and we can upload that. So let me do that. Let's head over to the browser and let's open netlify.com website. And you want to create an account here. Everything is free, so you don't have to worry about that. Go to the login. And now let's add a new site here on the top right. Add a new site, and we want to deploy manually, or deploy actually. So click here on the browse to upload. And in the download section, for me, I want to click on the dist folder. So let's upload it. Click on the upload. And let's wait for a couple of seconds depending on your connection. And there you go, it was very fast. Now what we can do is, this is the URL of our application. We can change that. So go to the site settings and let's change the site name. So we can type something as Apple iPhone website, so that we have much nicer URL. So let's save that and let's click on the site to preview it. And it's beautiful. It's working. And there you go. This is astonishing. So let's sum up what we did and what we created. So we created these beautiful animations which changes these 3 positions. And at the end we created this preview mode as well, which is astonishing, really. Also we added this loading animation indicator at the beginning of our website. And what we also did is we optimized this for mobile devices. And obviously you could spend even more time to optimize this website for different devices, right? But that wasn't the purpose of this tutorial. The purpose of this tutorial was to show you how to animate 3D objects inside of your website. And there are some edge cases probably on this website that needs to be handled in regards to the layout and optimization. I hope you guys learned something new, and if you want to support me and get the full source code of this tutorial, go check my Patreon at patreon.com/codewithsloba. Or if this tutorial reaches 1000 views, I will release the full source code on my GitHub. Also, if you get stuck during the development of this project, you can get my help, so check the advanced tiers on my Patreon as well. Also, I have private one-on-one chat where I can help you and support you on this project. Until the next time, happy coding!